King Charles opened a speech in Canada this week by saying the following, quote, I would like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin Oshkosh people, and we whites are so sorry. Can you ever forgive us? Pwitty please with sugar on top. End quote. I, for one, applaud the king for his humble groveling and think that it's a good idea that we all take time to acknowledge the Indians. If King Charles, a man who sits on a literal throne built from pillaged treasure, can be so magnanimous, what about the rest of the Canadian government? I think it's time that they cede that land back to the native people and move. The Prime Minister should take a 23andMe test and hit the bricks back to wherever his people come from. Quit bragging about your stolen land and give it back. Nothing's stopping you. Don't talk about it, be about it. I'll be the first to wish you bon voyage. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Well, hello, everyone. So we have 3 topics today, although it's really kind of 2.5, because the third topic is not really a topic we're going to get deep into. I just want to talk about it briefly. But we're going to be talking about free speech in Britain and a land acknowledgement done in Canada by King Charles. And then we're going to talk about Emmanuel Macron a little bit. He got belittled by his wife in public, and we're going to kind of talk about that. But first, before we get into any of that, we're going to do our favorite comment from last week. Our friend Jan says, that tail on your lapel. I think she was referring to this tail right here. Obviously, as always, Winnie gets all the comments. Oh my gosh, look at her. Look at her. Say hi, Winnie. No, never talkative. She gets more fan mail than me, that's for sure. It's all right. It's understandable. She's adorable. I get it. But anyway, she always appreciates the comment. It doesn't even go to her head. You believe this? I read her all the comments, and she never acts like a rock star, even though clearly people love her. It's really humbling to watch someone be so cool and so really just put together. I don't know. It's amazing what that cat's capable of, and really inspires me to just be better because, one positive comment just goes to my head and really drowns out about 10 negatives. That's kind of the ratio. One good comment to every 10 negative, and that's all I need, really. I don't need a lot of encouragement. In fact, I almost feel like too much encouragement would just derail anybody. I feel like too much encouragement really just doesn't give you anything to strive for. How are you going to be better if everyone thinks you're the best? Michael Jordan needed somebody in the locker room telling him he sucked. Or maybe just that little voice in the back of his head that said it. Otherwise, why are you going to go out there and shoot 200 shots from the corner a day? And you're just not going to do it. Anyway, thanks, Jan. Appreciate you, and thanks for listening. We are going to be talking topic 1, free speech in Britain. Now, I think Americans have an idea that free speech is a Western value. And this is somewhat true, but it's also somewhat of a misdirect. And it really, because we have the First Amendment in the United States, we think that all of the places that are similar to the United States in the way they govern or the way that they live culturally, that they also have some sort of protection for freedom of speech. But it's not really true. There really is not free speech around the world because as I said this, Winnie just starts meowing like crazy. As we go around the world, we think that freedom of speech is like it is here in the United States. And Europe would be the biggest one that we would look to say they're comparable to us in the way that they govern, in the way that they live culturally, Western civilization in general. We think of it as Europe and the United States. There's a couple other places in there as well. Like Japan's in Asia, but it's considered a Western culture at this point. And they're Westernized, just kind of like Korea. And it's really just this term, this catch-all now for places that embraced democracy and, in the old school sense of the word, liberalism. So we look at places like that and we say, well, one of the things that makes countries, democracies and liberal and all of these things is that they have free speech, but it's not true whatsoever. So what you'll find in France and in Britain, for example, are that they have rights that guarantee them freedom of speech. In a sense, they say, hey, you have the right to express opinions, you have the right to dissent, you have the right to do all these things. But what they've done over the years is undermine this in a gigantic way. And the biggest examples right now are probably Germany and Britain. And Britain in particular is egregiously bad on free speech. And Britain, you think about Britain, the British Empire is responsible for exporting some of the greatest values of all time throughout the world. So India is better for being colonized by the British. America is better for being colonized by the British. Colonialism, and this is going to be a very controversial take, colonialism is not a bad thing because Britain has a great culture, or they had in a time in the world when many places didn't. British culture was superior, and exporting those values throughout the world was a good thing. So I know that a lot of people think that that's a terrible thing to say, but it is absolutely true. The United States is better for having been colonized by the British, and many of our founding fathers were British, and those men studied British law. They studied philosophy, ancient philosophy, which is obviously rooted deeply in British education because Britain has some of the greatest educational institutions in the world, and they take education very seriously. So you look at a guy, and many of the people that the founding fathers studied were British thinkers who came before them, Enlightenment thinkers who came before them. So you look at people like Jefferson or Madison or John Adams, and you say those guys were influenced by British culture and British ways of thinking. The legal system in the United States is based off of the British legal system. That's just the way it is. The way that things work and all of these rights that you have are based off of the ideas that came from Britain. And now, today, 2025, British ideals about liberalism and protecting individual rights are under threat in a gigantic way. Britain is a terrible example and have an incredibly draconian system of laws policing free speech at this point. And so it really is kind of troubling to think, because if free speech in the rest of the world degrades, the United States can't stand alone. It really won't. What you'll find is that if cultural norms throughout the world shift in a certain direction, the United States, though we are the global hegemon, we tend to shift culture. Culture can still influence the United States. It's not as though we are an island unto ourselves. For example, just look at something like K-pop. Okay, America exports our culture all over the world. Our pop stars are famous all over the world. Our movie stars are famous all over the world. People do American things all over the world. But sometimes it goes the other way. Why is K-pop so incredibly popular in the United States? Most of the lyrics are sung in Korean. Most Americans don't speak Korean, but Korean shows and Korean singers are now very popular in the United States. They're not replacing Ariana Grande and Taylor Swift on the top of the charts, but it's a very popular thing in the United States among Western whites. It's not like there's a bunch of Koreans in the United States who are pushing this. It's kids in the West who are pushing this. And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with K-pop. It's not my thing, but it doesn't matter. But my point is that culture can go from the outside in. It doesn't always go from the inside out in America. So if the rest of the world, if Europe starts to descend into a place that is more draconian on their free speech codes, then we can expect to see the United States government follow suit. It doesn't always work just one way. So in Europe, for years, the EU has had laws that criminalize denying the Holocaust. And I have always been opposed to this. I think if you are a person who denies the tragedy or scope of the Holocaust, you're one of two things. You are incredibly ignorant, or you're a bad person. There's one thing that the Nazis were really good at, and it was keeping records. It's not as though the Nazis falsified their documents to make it look like they killed more people. They didn't do that. They weren't hiding the ball on this, not amongst themselves, not in their journals, not in their logs from the camps. They weren't doing these things. They killed 6 million Jews. Okay, that's a thing that happened in Europe. When people attempt to deny that or say, well, the Holocaust never happened, it's a Jewish conspiracy. When they say these things in Europe, you can be arrested. You can be put in jail for this, and it's been that way for years. And I've always been opposed to that because you have the right to be wrong. You have the right to be a conspiracy theorist. You have the right to do these things. I believe you do. But in Europe, you don't. And that's always been the case. And in recent times, these laws have expanded outward, and they have begun to criminalize all sorts of speech. There was a comedian, I wish I could remember off the top of my head this case. I'm just thinking about it. In Germany a few years ago, who was put in jail for some jokes that he told. And I remember at the time being really upset about this and saying, this is ridiculous. Why would you start jailing comedians? Well, now it's happening in Britain, and it's happening every single day. They are cracking down on political speech. They're cracking down on dissent in a way that anyone in the world should be troubled with, because Britain, though they're not as strong as they once were, they still are a very influential nation in the EU and around the world. They still have 14-something countries that are not necessarily British, but subscribe to the monarchy, like Canada, who we're going to talk about later. Technically, Canada is its own country. Everyone says that. Everyone says Canada, they know it's Canada and Britain. They're not the same. It's not under the banner of the EU or the UK. It's its own country. But they still have a monarchy, and King Charles is still the monarch of Canada, which is wild to me. And I'll explain that a little bit later when we talk about King Charles giving a speech. But basically, Britain is still very influential. So this political speech that they're cracking down on, by the way, it only appears to go in one direction. They are upset because of Brexit that obviously happened over a decade ago now. I'm trying to remember what year that was. It was, I think, around a decade ago. But they're upset because the population left the EU, mostly because of immigration into Britain and keeping British, which is, I think, a fine thing to do. There's nothing wrong with wanting to keep Britain. And they have used these new laws. Actually, they've gone back to use old laws in new ways, and it is ridiculous. They've made it a criminal offense. They basically have an act. It's called I think it was called the Communications Act. It came out in 2003. I got a note here. So it makes it a criminal offense as part of the Communications Act. And here's what the quote is. The quote from the act is, quote, malicious communications persistently make use of public electronic communications networks for the purpose of causing annoyance, inconvenience, or needless anxiety, end quote. So that is a line from the 2003 Communications Act in Britain that has been used to put people in jail. And not just a couple people. Thousands of people in Britain have been arrested for social media use over the last few years. And I have some examples here. Adam Smith Connor, 51-year-old British Army vet, was silently praying within 150 meters of an abortion clinic. He was arrested. He has been fighting this for 2 years at this point. It's cost him $113,000 for silently praying, because they also establish these things called buffer zones around abortion clinics. So you can't stand outside and protest. You can't do all these things. You're not allowed to protest in Britain. They don't have a right to do that. You're not allowed to silently pray to yourself in front of an abortion clinic. Apparently, Adam Smith Connor was praying he had a girlfriend who had an abortion, and he was praying for his aborted son. That's what he says. And so he was arrested. It cost him $113,000 for silently praying, not even out loud. A 74-year-old Scottish grandma named Rose Docherty was arrested for holding a sign in front of an abortion clinic that read, quote, coercion is a crime, here to talk only if you want, end quote. Straight to jail. 74-year-old woman holding a sign, not talking to anybody, offering counseling or a conversation with anyone who's interested. It says only if you want. Straight to jail. 74-year-old grandma. 21-year-old Jamila Abdi. She is a black woman who was arrested for using the N-word online when she was referring to a black soccer player. She was put through the legal system for 8 months before charges were dropped due to a fear of being labeled racist. The government dropped it not because they couldn't win their argument, but because they said, well, if we arrest a black person for using the N-word, maybe people will call us racist, and that'd be bad. So they dropped it. Tommy Robinson has been arrested for anti-immigration speak. This is one that has happened to a lot of people who say things about immigration or who make comments about immigrants in Britain and wind up in jail because of it. And we actually have some numbers behind this. The London Times said 3,395 people were questioned for online speech in 2016. So this is 1 year, 3,395 people. 9 people a day. Half of those people were prosecuted for crimes. So you're looking at 1,700 people went to jail for crimes that they posted online. And that was in 1 year alone. Free speech is the most important right. It's the first one. Think about that. When our founders wrote the Constitution, they didn't put in a Bill of Rights. They didn't do this. And James Madison said, we need a universal Bill of Rights that's attached to our Constitution so that people understand that they have rights. Thomas Jefferson thought it was a bad idea. He said, hey, this Constitution that I wrote, perfect. You leave it alone. And James Madison said, no, I want to guarantee our citizens' rights. The first one that they agreed on was the right to free speech. That's number one. It's number one for a reason. It's the First Amendment because it is the most important right that we have. The freedom of speech, the freedom to protest, the freedom of the press, the freedom of religion, all of these things are encompassed in one thing that the founders said, this is so important that we have to add it to the Constitution. Hey, our government will work just fine. The Constitution is the framework of government. We've created a great system, but we want to guarantee that the government is not going to wind up like Britain. And that's what they've done. Or that's what they did. And it's worked out for us, but it's not working out in Europe right now. When they take away your ability to speak, they take away your ability to communicate ideas. When you are unable to communicate ideas, you're unable to change people's minds, you're unable to affect change at all, you are not free in any sense of the word, because it means that they have taken away your right to control your fate and your right to control your government. If you do not have the right to free speech, all the other rights are irrelevant. You think the Third Amendment, I don't have to quarter foreign soldiers in my home, do you think that right means anything? Like, what is the point of it if I don't have the right to say what I want? I can't even say, hey, this isn't right, if I can't say that. This is going to be a terrible example. If I want to be a terrible racist or a homophobe, or if I want to just be a surly, unpleasant person, I have the right to do that. And you don't have the right to tell me I can't do that, because free speech means protecting speech that you don't agree with. It's not about protecting speech that you like. No one is trying to ban speech that everyone likes. If I came out there and I said, chocolate chip cookies are delicious and I love them, and I would like to eat them with a glass of milk, no one comes out and says, we have to stop him from speaking. This is too much. No one's doing that. No one cares. Even if you don't like chocolate chip cookies, no one cares. But when you come out there and you talk about controversial topics, people will try to ban you. And the people you don't agree with are the people that you should allow to speak. I am a big believer that sunlight is the best disinfectant. You cannot tamp down speech. You cannot tamp down behavior and expect it to go away. You expose it. You expose bad ideas to good ideas, and I believe that good ideas win. I do think that. I think that many people who hold bad ideas have never been confronted with someone who is very good at articulating good ideas, and that's why they have them. Yes, some people are just bad. Some people are going to have bad beliefs. Some people are going to say bad, nasty things, but you cannot take away the speech of people just because you're claiming to protect people from other worse people. You can't say, well, it's hate speech. Oh, you talked about there's knife crime among the immigrant population in Britain, and you talked about it. And the fact that you talked about it means that you have to go to jail, because maybe people will be more anti-immigrant if you talk about real life. Oh, you want to talk about grooming gangs that happen throughout the UK. Well, that actually, it just has a tinge to it of xenophobia. Straight to jail for you. All right, you're not allowed to talk about this issue because it could make, by the way, it could make what they say now is Asian men, as if we're talking about people from China or Korea or Japan. They throw Middle Easterners in there as Asia. All right, I get it. Technically, yes, you're true when you say Asian men, but that's not what we're talking about. That's not what they're talking about in the UK when they're talking about grooming gangs. They're talking about men from the Middle East and Northern Africa who come over and do terrible things to British girls at a scale that would just boggle your mind. If you bring that up in Britain, you can go to jail. And it's wild because, again, this is a real topic that needs a real discussion. And if you can't have a real discussion, you cannot fix real problems. And Britain is just going in a terrible direction. I hope that they can course correct. I don't know. I don't know what their plan is moving forward, but I really do hope that Britain changes their ways, because free speech around the world is under dire threat. And if we think that everything, it's why I've always said, and this is a little slightly different topic, but it's why I've always said that our foreign policy with other places, why I'm actually, I know it's a dirty word, but I'm actually very pro-intervention, other places. I think that we should use American military might around the globe to do things. I do. I thought we should have stayed in Afghanistan forever. We should stay in Iraq. We should be in Syria. We should keep our bases in Korea and Japan. We should have a global military presence. I do believe that we should flex our muscle, because it's the same way as I'm talking about free speech. Problems around the world are a plane ride away. There is no longer a way to be an isolationist in this day and age. It just doesn't work that way. The internet connects us right now to other countries. It is so easy to go from one place to another place, by boat, by plane, by car. If you're on a giant landmass like Asia and Europe, you can get from one place to another. And the way that terrorism can be exported around the globe is the same way that bad ideas can be exported around the globe. There's a reason why Muslims in the United States who have lived in the United States have been radicalized by ideas online. And so bad ideas can spread like a virus. So if you start tamping down on free speech in certain places, that idea can come to us. And I worry about that. I really do. I saw Joe Biden, that administration, do that with social media use, partnering with social media companies to kick people off of platforms and what is the word, in the algorithm to de-amplify them. And I was one of those guys. YouTube gave me a strike for going against their COVID guidelines. All right, you're allowed to do that, I guess, as a company. But when you're influenced by the government, that's a whole different thing. And our government got real comfortable cozying up to social media companies and telling them to take posts down off the internet. It should be illegal. We should make it illegal, by the way. And I think the Republicans in Congress should pass a law that says you are not allowed to do this. You're not allowed to do this kind of behavior with social media companies. Anyway, we're going to leave it there, because I think that this is a really important topic, and I think people need to understand that we don't live on an island. I get it. We have some big, beautiful oceans that make it seem that way, but we don't. There's no such thing as an island. Ideas are universal. They travel in the air, and right now they are in Britain and they're in the United States at the same time, breathing the same air. So we just have to be very careful. Anyway, topic 2, land acknowledgments. Okay, I'm going to say a lot about this, but before we do, I am going to just play you the video of what I'm talking about so you understand what this is. Here we go.
I'd like to acknowledge that we are gathered on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe people. This land acknowledgement is a recognition of shared history as a nation, while continuing to deepen my own understanding. It is my great hope that in each of your communities and collectively as a country, a path is found toward truth and reconciliation in both word and deed.
Treaties are with the Crown.
Okay, so this is just the opening of a speech that King Charles gave to Canada's Parliament. And it started with that land acknowledgement. So this is something that happens, I think, yearly or maybe 2 times a year. I'm not 100% sure how many times the Canadian Parliament goes through a new session, but every new session of Canada's Parliament begins with something they call the King's Address. Now, typically, the King doesn't fly to Canada to give a King's Address. It's done by the Canadian monarch's representation. It's someone known as a viceroy. So, by the way, this is what I was talking about. Canada is one of those countries that still has a monarchy. The King Charles is still considered the King of Canada. It's just that the King doesn't really have any power. He's just a figurehead. It's a little different than the British system, but there's somebody who lives in Canada who's the viceroy. I don't remember her name, but That's basically the king's representation in Canada. And there are 14 countries that do this, by the way. There are 14 countries that still subscribe to King Charles as the king, but it's just a little bit different because it obviously doesn't have the same power as in Britain. But every session of Canadian Parliament begins with the king's address, every new session. So he actually flew over to Canada and gave this address. And I don't really care about the address except to talk about this first part because I think that it's ridiculous. I think land acknowledgements are one of the stupidest things that has popped up among the very left-leaning sections of society and government. So you see this in places like New Zealand, which has an incredibly woke government, and in Canada, which is the same deal. And I think in Australia they do this now too, and it's ridiculous. Land acknowledgements are incredibly stupid. And they are very popular among these liberal governments and organizations. You see it here in the United States too. You'll see someone give up on college, one of these, dummies who gets up there and wants to start off at a college by giving a land acknowledgement at their protest to whoever used to live there. And I think that this is a prime example of the worst kind of virtue signaling nonsense. This does not make you a good person to say, hey, I know back in the day, this native tribe used to live here, and how bad it is that they don't anymore, right? Am I right, guys? That the natives, they're moved out. They were genocided away. How terrible. And I'm good because I know that and you don't. And I think it's just incredibly dumb because there's no plan here. If I was to say, so where I live right now, I'm not 100% sure what native tribes used to be here, but it was probably, first of all, it's probably more than one. And I don't know if you know this, but this is the pre-European Eden myth. This idea that prior to the European colonizers setting foot in the Americas, it was a wondrous paradise where everyone just walked around and they picked fruit off of the trees and they were one with nature and everyone lived in peace and harmony, and then Europeans showed up and just killed everyone because they're mean and savage and terrible. This is a fantasy. The idea, this what they call the noble savage, it's not a real thing, okay? Native American tribes warred with each other a lot. They took land from each other a lot. That's the story of human nature is that if you go into the South and Central Americas, their culture was terrible. Look at the Aztecs and the Incas. How many people they slaughtered, children, they sacrificed to the sun god on their temples. You have mountains of skulls from the thousands of people who were put under the knife to appease the gods. These cultures were not ideal, all right? They weren't great. They didn't invent things. That's why they lost into Europeans, because they didn't invent. They had no technology. They didn't have the wheel, okay? So we're talking about people who I think there are some cool things about Native American culture and Indian culture, and I think that that's awesome, okay? But I don't think that they're better than Europeans or that they deserve this land because why? Because their ancestors walked across the Bering Strait and ours came by boat? That makes it better? No, it doesn't. It's ridiculous. And the idea of a genocide is also really just kind of nonsense. Most Native Americans, as people should know if they don't, most Native Americans died from disease. It's not that the Europeans came over and killed all the Native Americans. The European contact brought diseases from Europe that killed Native Americans, and it wasn't because they were trying to do it. It's just because Native Americans and Europeans developed different immunities. So when you come over and make contact, a lot of people died because they weren't immune to diseases brought from Europe. A lot of Indians died because of that, and it wasn't on purpose. Obviously, there was war among Indians and Europeans, and this was a big issue, but it wasn't as though the Indians prior to the Europeans just lived in peace and harmony. They warred a lot. There were entire tribes that never planted crops. They moved around and warred and stole things. I think it's I can't remember off the top of my head. I want to say it's the Apache, but I could be completely wrong. But there are entire tribes that did this. And you look at back through the history, it'll be, you go to South Dakota or is it North Dakota, South Dakota? Well, it doesn't matter. You look at a place like Mount Rushmore. When they did this, they did a land acknowledgement there once. And the reality is that the tribe who owned that land, if you go back, it's like they took it from another tribe who took it from another tribe through war and conquest. It wasn't as though they just said, hey, it's our turn, now we get the mountain. No, they used to kill each other all the time. These land acknowledgements are dumb because not only are there multiple tribes, it'd be like, who do you give the land to? But there's no real push to do it. So what you're doing is you stand up there and you say, hey, we're on the unceded territory of the Algonquin people. Okay, what does that do for them? It does nothing for them. It's not making their life better for you to say that. What are you giving them? What are you doing? You're doing nothing. It's basically like, imagine that we're at recess and you have a red ball and I take your red ball and I hold it up over my head. And then I say to you, don't worry. I acknowledge that here I am with the unseeded red ball of my playmate. And that's bad. And they go, hey, give me my ball back. And you go, no, I don't worry. But I acknowledge it's bad. What is it doing for them? It does nothing for them. I still stole their ball. If you really believe that we stole things from the Indians and you want to give it back, I'm all for this, actually. And I understand that I can be sarcastic, but I'm dead serious when I say this. If you think that it was morally wrong for European colonizers to take control of the Americas, you should go back to where your ancestors came from. Pick up and move. Sell your things. Give your dingy apartment to an Indian. They're still around. They exist. You go find one and say, hey, man, listen, my lease is up in June, but you can have it till then. I'm moving back to Europe where my people came from. Our bad. I feel really bad that we did this to you, so why don't you just have my place? You could do this. Nothing is stopping you. And if you don't want to do this, or if you think that if you roll your eyes and say, oh, well, that's such hyperbole. That is, I can't believe you'd exaggerate to this extent, and that's not the point, and blah, blah, blah. Then you're making excuses. You don't really want to do anything. You just want to virtue signal that you're a good person because you acknowledge Native Americans exist and they lived here. It doesn't make you a good person. It makes you a moron. And it makes you a person who, again, it seems like you're bragging. If I hold your red ball in the air and I say, this is mine, unseeded, baby, keeping it, it's like, that sounds like a brag. It sounds like I took it from you and I'm not giving it back. And so you should give it back. Give back your little piece, all right? You own some land, give it back. Take all your belongings. Like I said about the Prime Minister of Canada, take a 23andMe. Wherever your biggest percentage is, head on back there. Figure it out. We don't need you. Trust me. America will get along just fine without you. Bon voyage. And I'm dead serious when I say that. You should just go. There's nothing stopping you. Go be a good person. Go be morally superior to the rest of us and move back to Europe or wherever, your people are from. And I think it'll be good. I think it would be a good thing for more people to do. I want to just real quick here. I'm going to go to topic 3, Emmanuel Macron getting pushed in the face. Okay, again, I want to start with a video because I think it's just important to see the video so you know what I'm talking about if you didn't see it. Check this out. So the door opens on the French plane. You see Emmanuel Macron stand there. Boom, right in the face. He waves, then walks off. Everyone looks a little embarrassed. Slow motion view now. This is important. So you see him, doors open. The face push, boom. He turns, he sees the doors are open. People are taking pictures. He goes, oh, hello, people. Let me wave it off. And like I said, all the crew looks real embarrassed. They're like, let's get out of here. Then he disappears for a minute, comes back, doesn't look happy. His wife, who looks like Skeletor, comes down. He offers her his hand. He says, here, baby, take my arm. Let's walk down the stairs. She ignores him. And then they walk down the stairs. Okay. So why are we talking about this? Initially, my thought was, because it's hilarious. And Emmanuel Macron's not my favorite politician. I think French politics are typically pretty bad, and he was being mocked endlessly online for this. And I wanted to just dogpile. I said, hey, Emmanuel Macron, I don't like him. I don't like his policies. I don't like what he's done. He's done a couple good things in France, but for the most part, I don't like him or his government. And I was just going to dogpile on and make fun of him, which, he rightly deserves. But then I really thought about this a lot, and I really dislike this video. I think that it might seem kind of silly, but this is disrespectful and abusive behavior and from his wife. And I think if the roles were reversed, no one would be laughing about this. If Emmanuel Macron was a female leader of the world and that door opened and you saw her husband push her in the face, just take her hand and push that face, then people would go, oh my God, this is abusive. This is not good. You shouldn't be putting your hands on people. You shouldn't be pushing your spouse in the face. I don't care. It didn't look playful. Like you play fight with your spouse or you wrestle, whatever. This didn't look playful. This looked angry. No one looked amused. He didn't look amused when he walked out. She didn't look amused. Nobody looked like they were having a good time or laughed it off. He didn't laugh it off. He turned when his face got pushed. He saw the door was open. He waved really awkwardly and then walked off. He was not having a good time. This is not playful spouse stuff. If the roles were reversed, no one's laughing. And I think that so often men, I'm an advocate for men being tough. Okay? I think men should be men, which means being tough. But it doesn't mean men can't be victims. And I think that there are some people who are so quick to dismiss it and shame them for it and mock people online for things like this. I don't know what their relationship is like. Maybe this is a one-off, but I doubt it. I don't think that that's how it works, because you're in a plane surrounded by people and you feel comfortable enough to push your spouse in the face. And my natural reaction, again, is to just kind of go, oh, that's funny. And then you think about it and you say, well, why do I think that? It's not really funny. It's kind of sad. Even if I don't like Emmanuel Macron, it's sad that we live in a place where men can get laughed at for things like this, because he might have some issues. He might have some problems. I mean, he's not a tall guy, first of all. They're about the same height, so it's kind of an even fight, although I think she's a lot older than him. But still, it's just one of those things like, if the roles were reversed, no one's laughing. Everyone would be having a conversation about spousal abuse. And instead, everyone's just mocking this guy in the comments. And it's sad. I don't like that. I don't like that at all. I don't think it's a good thing that we really delegitimize men having some emotion or men being able to be the victims. It's really difficult for men. And again, I'm an advocate. I think men should be tough. But I think that part of being tough sometimes means you got to deal with your shit. You really do. Because what's not tough is bottling it all up until it comes out in negative ways, either against yourself or people you love. There's a reason men deal with suicide at a higher rate than women. There's a reason that men wind up abusing, overdosing and dying more than women, or using alcohol or finding crutches more than women. And it's because men internalize things. Women do too. It's not that they don't. But a lot of women feel comfortable sharing more than their male counterparts. And I think that we need to find a balance between the soft, effeminate, incredibly progressive men who have lost all touch with masculinity, and the old school Gary Cooper masculinity that men just repressed everything until it became a ball of cancer and died. It kills you eventually. I think that there's a balance between those two things. I haven't found it personally, but I hope that other people do, because I think that it's important that you have some control over your emotions and feelings so that you don't take it out on the people you love. And I look at a guy like Macron and I say, this is a great example. Men can't hurt because everyone just mocks them for it. And that is not a good thing in society, not to get too preachy about it. Anyway, I want to leave it there for the week. I have an essay I'm working on right now. I'm trying to get published, so I'll keep you guys informed on that, because I think this is a good one. I really do. And other than that, as always, questions, comments, concerns. I love the comments, people. Negative, positive, agree with me, disagree with me. I always appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys next Friday.